Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they're using their gifts and talents to help others. I believe that it is very important that we share our stories because to me, we are never more connected as human beings when we share our stories. When we talk about our successes, but also mention our challenges, and why I'm always encouraging people to share their stories. Imagine a young person or someone listening to you and being inspired or encouraged to step beyond their limitations, beyond their challenges, and one day becoming someone that makes a magnificent contribution to society. Someone who might be a head of state or an oncologist or someone who discovers a vaccine that saves millions of lives. I also believe that it is very important that we pursue success not so that we can glorify these successes, but I believe that our successes are beacons of light to remind others that they too can shine. Tonight, we have a gem of our soil, the Honorable Justice Roxane George. We'll take a short break. We are back. Those who are joining us for the first time, I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Lady next to me is the Honorable Madam Justice Roxane George. Madam George, good evening and welcome to CWS.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much.
It is indeed an honor to have you as a guest on CWS. You were born and raised in Guyana.
And still living there,
And still living there.
happily so.
Can you give us a glimpse into your life growing up in Guyana at the age of 9 and 15 and who you became at 21?
Sometimes I don't remember what happened yesterday. You're taking me a little while back, but at age 9, I would have been preparing for common entrance as we knew it then. It's now the National Grade 6 assessment. I guess I would have been working hard. I passed for the Bishop's High School, school I love. I was into piano. I played piano. I was going to piano. I was into piano. I played piano. I was going to piano lessons. I didn't do dance. I definitely was not a dance material. At 15, I'd have been in third, fourth form, preparing for what we now call CSEC, Caribbean Secondary Examinations. It was then called just CXC. I was an art student, had no interest in sciences. I enjoyed my educational experience at the Bishop's High School, and that's what I recall at ages 9 and 15.
What do you think your parents would say about you if they were asked to describe you?
Basically very quiet, very studious, stubborn, fun-loving when I want to be fun-loving. I'm a family person, so yeah.
Do you remember any words of wisdom from either parent that still resonate with you today?
Oh yes, my parents. I have three siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, and they've always exhorted that we be respectful of others, that we be humble, to be giving and sharing of in personality, and to just be very amiable. Not to be brash and pretentious. My mother in particular would say, don't be a fop. They were very, just brought us up to be very, very respectful of others and of ourselves, yes.
What are your fondest memories of them?
Well, for those who don't know, my father was a judge of the High Court, of the Supreme Court of Guyana, of the Court of Appeal. He retired as Chancellor of the Judiciary. and went on to serve in a couple other jurisdictions, the Bahamas and Belize. After his retirement, my mother was a trained medical social worker, but became a homemaker, as we call them now. But my fondest memories are being taken to the creeks. We used to go to the creeks with other family friends, especially during the school holidays, and have a lot of fun at the creeks. Big picnics, large picnics, I remember those. And kite flying. Kite flying at Easter. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned your dad having been a judge.
Mm-hmm.
You are now a judge. While growing up, do you think that him being a judge might have influenced you in that direction in any way?
Maybe subconsciously, I don't really know. I know my father and lots of other family members who are educators, and lots of my teachers maybe even, felt that I was smart enough to do science. But I honestly feel persons are wired differently, and I was not wired for science. I was an art student, and I guess reasonably good at that, and I was quite happy to be an art student. When it came to choosing a career, I was kind of conflicted between doing mass communications or law, and my father did say, well, lean to something in case you need to put up a shingle and look after yourself, you should do that. But I think I just naturally gravitated to it. There wasn't any pressure whatsoever from my parents to study law. I just fell into it, and I've enjoyed it all the way through.
Outside your parents, who would you say has had the greatest influence on you?
Going to Bishop's High School has meant that there were lots of women in the main who came to the school to address us on various issues. I remember Shirley Field Ridley, in particular. I remember Mrs. Viola Burnham coming to speak to us as students. And later on, after I came back, when I finished my studies and I returned to Guyana, women such as Magda Pollard, Justice Desiree Bernard, recently retired from the Caribbean Court of Justice, Dr. Janice Jackson, psychologist, and Karen D'Souza. There were a number of women. Hazel Halley Burnett, then head of the Women's Affairs Bureau within the Ministry of Human Services. They were women who, some or the other, I met them and we just clicked, so to speak. And they have been my mentors and, I won't say confidants, but advisors, and really made me understand and appreciate what it is to be a woman, women's rights issues, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
How do you, in reflection, how do you see that, see these women, powerful women in their own rights, in their own fields, taking you under their wing, so to speak, and mentoring you, advising you? How important is that for a young woman in any career?
Oh, it's extremely important because it says to you, you have a living example of what you can achieve. You have a living example of information. I think in Guyana and in some parts of the Caribbean region, but I can speak specifically for Guyana, we tend to have an institutional memory gap. And it is important that information and legacy is passed on from one generation to the next. We don't have much writings, I know. It tends to be oral. I know many say I should write a book. I don't know when I will get around to doing that. But that tradition of passing on the message is so important. And I try with the little that I can achieve to pass on the message that has been handed to me, to say to young people, and particularly young women, be the best that you can be. And more importantly, respect yourself and respect others.
Do you remember any, I know you believe in teaching and passing on knowledge and information to younger people, but do you remember any teaching moment that you've experienced with one of these women that you've mentioned that have stuck with you?
There's so many. There are so many over the years. I was fortunate, in particular, Magda Pollard, who I can say is a mentor, over the years has always encouraged me so much. For instance, even to study for my master's. She's one of those, apart from my parents in the background, who said to me, Roxane, when are you going to get it done? You simply have to. And then she was on my, after I did my master's, she says, and when are you going to go for your doctorate? So they're always behind you, giving you that little extra push. And sometimes you need that little push. And I try with my interactions with students, mainly from the Bishop's High School, sixth form, who do law. Some students from University of Guyana do come to see me. I try my best to give them that advice and information to say to them, push the envelope. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. That's something that Justice Bernard always says. Strive for excellence. And be committed to what you have to do. Set yourself high ideals.
I want to stick around a little bit where Bishop's High School is concerned. Not only because we are both students of Bishop's High School, former students, and we just had a reunion where people of all ages converged and shared memories and so on and so forth. But you mentioned some women who have attended Bishop's High School.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context of legacy, of passing on, how important is that for an alumni association? But let me frame it another way. How important is it to have mentors who have attended the same institution that you have?
Because they pass on the values of the institution. I think we've fallen away a bit on that at home right now, but we're trying to revive it. For instance, Dr. Jackson, along with Mr. Vidyaratha Kasoon, and I and others, we had a mentoring program for the sixth formers, where it was a 6-week program, and we spoke about a wide range of issues, from domestic violence to music, to what are your views on this, that, the next, and the other. And to try to also get across to them the values of being a Bishop student, the values of being a leader. Not a leader in a brash way, but somebody and we always go back to the word respect.
Yes.
Somebody who can be respected and must command respect in whatever sphere of endeavor. We also have the mentoring program for the younger students, where Bishop students, former Bishop students, mentor students in the junior part of the school from first to third form. I've had 2 mentees. One is just completed university, the other one is halfway through there. And it gives you some sense of satisfaction to be able to impart some knowledge. It's not even education type knowledge in a formal sense, but just a voice to listen to and also to interact with. And we have found it has been very, very beneficial. There are a number of the students, especially from the sixth form program, who've gone on to do law. And I interact with them on to now. Some of them are already lawyers. So it's very, very gratifying to be able to contribute in that small way. And we would really like to be able to recommence the sixth form program in particular, because those are the young people, the leaders of tomorrow. Those are the people who we have to pass that torch, the baton to carry us on. And that is what the Bishop's legacy is all about.
You mentioned 2 people who I was fortunate to be alive while they were in office. Shirley Field Ridley and Viola Barnum. Can you I know this might be unfair to ask you, but for those young people who don't know them or familiar with their work, and for the international audience who's listening, can you put them in context as to why they coming to the school and speaking to you was so important?
Well, they came to speak. They usually used to come for International Women's Day celebrations in March. At that time, my recollection is that we did not commemorate or recognize International Day Against Violence Against Women, which is November the 25th. But every International Women's Day, some leading woman in the country would come to the school to speak with us. And it always struck me that here were women who had achieved, who were very easy they were approachable, who were willing to come and speak to us as children, and who spoke very passionately about women's rights and women's issues and what it was and is to be a respectable and respected woman who must contribute and contribute meaningfully and not to be in a box, so to speak, in terms of traditional roles for women and girls. They said to us, go out and be the best that you can be and be leaders. And I think that I remember those two women in particular, but there would be many others who would have come. And our teachers also exhorted us in that regard. So it's something that it just became almost like second nature. It's a subconscious issue. Yeah.
Well, when we go back to bishops, which has historically prepared young people, especially young girls, for leadership, and as you said just now, not to remain in a box or to put themselves in a box. Looking back and reflecting on your accomplishments, what are your thoughts on that tradition?
Well, it's an excellent tradition, and that we have to continue it to try to impart to the young people, not only at the Bishop's High School, in whichever educational institution or organization, because you have a lot of youth clubs and groups, to emphasize to them that proper behavior is important, decorum is important. I mean, people look at Bishop's children and other children, say from Queen's College, Saints, Roses, and say, but how do they dress like that? It's because you instill certain values. Not because you want to be annoying, but because at the end of the day, when they step out of the school environment into the world of work, into that wider community, the world at large, how they carry themselves, how they speak, will set them above the rest. And that is what we like to say to the children. Not everybody will be a high flyer, but at least you must carry yourself properly.
On the subject of leadership, it's hard, it's difficult not to think of leadership when you mention those women. Mm-hmm. When did you first appreciate leadership?
I think for my parents in some respects, because apart from what I had mentioned earlier, they always said, don't just be a follower. Don't just follow the crowd. Think. My father's pet phrase always was, where are your brains? And you had to point and show him. Because he expected that you must think. Think before you leap. Think before you speak. Think before you act. To me, it's basic. And so, to me, those qualities were there in the home. And then when you get to school like Bishop's High School, which further nurtures that, I guess I got a double blessing.
What is your message to women and young girls on the importance of leadership and preparing to be leaders?
Well, the message. I think what I've been saying all along, it's a question of how you carry yourself. It's a question of being committed to whatever endeavor you're pursuing. Whether you want to get into profession of law, which is extremely demanding, whether you want to get into all these science and technology fields, which we're now pushing. I know there's a whole movement on the issue of IT and girls. To be respectful of yourself and others to the extent that you must appreciate that you're not to be a punching bag, whether it is a psychological punching bag or a physical punching bag. Issues of violence against women are of great concern to me, and I like to emphasize to young women that they must not accept any form of violence to their person, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, economic. You have a brain in your head, And once you, with God's grace, have the opportunity and the ability to work and to excel, go for it.
What do you think was the genesis of your passion for women's issues and women's rights?
It started off at school, in high school in particular. As I said, every International Women's Day, someone would come along to, a leading woman figure in the community would come to speak to us. I don't know at that age that I thought of it as women's rights issues. That was not in my conscience, but it obviously must have seeped in. And as I said, when I returned to Guyana, I remember going to a women's conference at the Tower Hotel, and just sitting there and listening and absorbing all the various bits and pieces of information. And I just got involved naturally, myself and Rose Benjamin Noble and Rosemary Cadogan. We just got involved, and it was just extremely gratifying. We joined the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers. At that time, Justice Bernard was still the president, yes, if my memory serves me correctly. And she took us under her wing, and we did a lot of outreach work on women's rights issues. We started to co-edit the Law New booklet series. We had a radio program. It was recorded at first, and then we went live. We did live programs. And then you started to fully appreciate what it is to be a citizen, to be a person, to command respect, to know your rights, to know your responsibilities. And so it has been a journey and a process over the years, but it started way back in high school.
Have you had any feedback from lay persons? I know this was a group of lawyers and organizations of attorneys, but have you had any positive feedback from lay persons that have been affected by this movement?
Oh yes, our outreach work we still do. I mean, I no longer go out and do community work. And we are encouraging a number of younger women lawyers to come on board, and quite a few of them have been very, very responsive. We're very gratified at their response. But going out into the communities and speaking to people, sometimes we will say, okay, we will schedule a 1-hour visit. Invariably, those outreach programs then, and I understand they still take about 3 hours. Once you start, the kind of information, the exchanges between whoever is in attendance with the lawyers and other facilitators, because sometimes we take along social workers with us, it's just tremendous. The recent outreach they had was in Kurukuru, just at the beginning of the Soesdijk Linden Highway area. And I am told, and like a lawyer say and verily believe, that there were about 100 persons in attendance over the course of the day. And they shared out the Law New booklets. They interacted with the persons. They would ask legal questions. The association members still go to do prisons visits at the women's prisons. Again, the women in the prisons, yes, they're incarcerated for whatever they would have done, but they have family issues, property issues, all kinds of matters that they need attention. And so they would give advice. I have visited the prisons on 2 occasions when I was a prosecutor. Along with the Guyana, under the aegis of the Guyana Association of Women Lawyers. But the feedback has always been positive, very, very positive. And what we have found also is that there's a hunger for knowledge. People want to have that information. They want to participate. They want to engage. They want to be consulted, and consulted meaningfully, so that they can contribute to the development of their communities and themselves.
I suppose that some of these outreach have not been without their challenges.
Yes, the main challenge is finance. And Guyana, although small, is still large. The terrain that we have to cover, the distances that we have to cover. We have not done as much work in the interior locations, though our members have gone to Lethem, they have gone to Madia. I know members went onto the Essequibo Coast a few months ago, within the past year. But it takes financing. We do get some financing, mainly from international financial institutions such as the Canadian Government's Development Agency, USAID, the British funding agency, I think it's called DFID. They all provide funds. Sometimes the EU, European Union Commission, they provide funding. Not only to Guyana Association of Women Lawyers, a number of other organizations that do this kind of outreach work. But of course, ours is focused on the legal aspect.
Did you find, I know you, Rose, and the two Roses grew up together, went to school together and so on, and you guys shared a bond since then. But did you find some of these efforts brought you closer and sort of encouraged you to continue?
Oh yes, and when it comes to Rose Benjamin Noble, she being a broadcaster, really facilitated us being using that media, the media of radio, to educate persons about their rights. So we had, as I said, a Law News series, which we used to tape, and we brought on both women and male lawyers also used to participate in that program. And then, as I said, we went live under the guidance of Rose Benjamin. But yes, it brought us together as friends. We had a lot of fun times doing a lot of fun things in various communities. I mean, and you did it, it inspired us. Volunteerism is so important. Yeah. And I used it, and I still tell the young lawyers, when you go out there and you volunteer in a community, you do not know what benefit you will get later on. It may be a person who becomes your client. It may be a person who becomes your friend. It may be a person who will help you in some way. I remember myself and another friend, Sandra Bart, another lawyer who's at CARICOM now, going to do an outreach program. Really? Yes. Going to do a program in Craig Village on the East Bank. And our reward, they baked us a lovely cake. And that was unique in the sense that it was a craft class. And the leader of the group asked us to go up and talk about women's rights issues while they knitted, crocheted, did whatever craft work they were doing. And so we got the cake and 2 lovely pin cushions. But it was gratifying. We were rewarded. We felt special. Our 3 hours of effort, of engagement, of interaction, of understanding grassroots women, their needs, their concerns, and how important, and imparting to them how important their work was in community building, in their families, for their families, and so on. So we really, really enjoyed it. I remember that outing in particular. It's very, very enjoyable.
I wanna ask you this question about, you mentioned grassroots and reaching out and so on. You were brought up not necessarily well-to-do or comfortably off, and exposed to other people within that same bracket and so on. Where did this, and this probably came from your parents, but I'll let you say it, where did this passion to help people or to reach out to grassroots people come from?
Well, you're quite right. It started with my parents. My father was a lion. So I grew up in that environment of service. I know I'm being encouraged to become a member of the Lions Club for the longest while, but I firmly believe that when one joins an organization, one must be able to commit 100%, and I don't think that I have the space to do that right now. I mean, I contribute in other ways. But so I grew up in an environment of service. My mother, as a social worker, continued her social work on a voluntary basis with many organizations. Growing up, we used to say to my mom, another meeting again, because she was in a number of organizations just helping people, volunteering. So you grew up in that environment, appreciating that not everyone has the blessings that you have, that one must cherish those blessings and share. Share what you have. It could be just your knowledge. You may not have anything much. You may not have a lot of money. Sharing doesn't have to only have to be with sharing money. It could be sharing your talent, sharing your knowledge, sharing a gift of a smile to someone. So, it's different ways of giving. And yes, I will thank my parents for that.
Almost mischievously, I must ask you this question. Did you see history repeat itself with your children asking you another meeting
Not so much another meeting, but bringing work, bringing work home and trying to manage them and their homework and doing my work at the same time.
How did you balance that?
You just have to have a very good split personality, positive split personality, I must say.
Positive, I haven't heard of it before. Positive split personality.
It's not easy, but one has to be, and it's something that women have to do all the time. I'm not saying men don't do it, but you just simply have to multitask. You just don't have a choice. You do not have a choice but to multitask. But I have had some complaints from my children, especially my second daughter, about mommy's always working. When she was smaller, not now. But she announced when I was working at Chambers of the DPP, she went and she said, my mother is always working. And then it struck me that, I really need to do something about it. Yeah.
I happen to know you since we were children and so on. And I know of your work, your commitments, and how very challenging they are. Yet you have this pleasant personality, you smile easily. How do you manage that? What is your secret?
I have not a clue what my secret is. I work with lists. I make a list for about everything. I have a list for travel. I have a list. And when I say a list, a detailed list. Because I will forget my glasses at home if I don't write it down. I make every week, I say to the children, so what do we need? What do you need to get for next week? And so I have to plan ahead. It obviously doesn't always work out, but I have to plan ahead. I have been blessed with an extremely supportive husband, Garfield Wiltshire, national athlete and table tennis, squash player, sports administrator. As I've mentioned my parents, I should mention his parents. Colin and Sybil Wiltshire. Of course, his dad passed away the same year that my dad passed away. We both lost our fathers in 2009. But a very, very supportive environment. And that's extremely important to be able to juggle the kind of work commitments we both have and to try to inspire our children to participate in as many things as they can without us all going stir crazy.
Well, one question and then I'll take a break.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the condition of women in Guyana?
Oh, it's mixed. There's been movement in terms of women in governance. I've done a bit of work on that, not only in Guyana, but regionally in the Caribbean community region, along with Rose Benjamin too, and Anande Trotman, Joseph, who's now in Grenada. So we've made some movement in terms of getting women's participation in political movement. What we need to do is to have more sensitive women. They have to be more sensitive to women's rights issues. That's a whole focus, not only for Guyana, but regionally. Mm-hmm. There's been movement on the economic front. More women are in business. We still don't have as many women in the higher echelons of the private sector as we would like. And that is something that internationally we're still working on. But where we are having a tremendous amount of challenges is in the area of violence against women and girls. Physical violence in particular, but as I mentioned earlier, there's psychological violence, there's economic violence, and sexual abuse of women and girls, children, I should say, generally. Those are major areas of concern. So whilst we have made a tremendous amount of strides, and Guyana has a lot of very, very good legislation, we have to put more systems in place for better implementation. That we recognize. We know we have a people resources problem. We don't have a lot of persons with the skills that are necessary. And that's why our diaspora is so important. We really need to have more persons from the diaspora either returning home permanently or returning to give of their time and expertise in many of the myriad areas that we need to have addressed. The issue of trafficking in women and girls in particular, trafficking in persons generally, is now a new area of concern that we have to tackle and address. The interior communities have opened up with the gold rush and gold mining, and that has opened up new challenges that we on the coastland getting into the interior to address those challenges. financial resources, human resources challenges. So whilst we have made tremendous strides, we do recognize that we have a lot more work to do.
Well, I would like you to think of this question during the break. What are your thoughts on gender equality in the judicial sphere in the Caribbean?
Mm.
We are back with Justice Roxane George. Roxane, the question before the break was, what are your thoughts on gender equality in the judicial sphere in the Caribbean? But more so, judges.
Well, that's a question we get asked by United Nations every year when we do our reporting on the status of women. On a serious note, we've managed to achieve larger numbers of women in the judiciary right through the Caribbean region. In Guyana, most of our magistrates are women, are female. At the High Court level, there are 5 of us. I hope I haven't made a mistake. 5 of us who are judges. At the Court of Appeal in Guyana, we only have 1. There are only 3 judges up there anyhow. At the CCJ level, the Caribbean Court of Justice level, Justice Bernard has just retired, and I gather there will be advertisements for judges, so we don't know if a woman judge or women judges will be appointed. I know in the OECS, that's the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the majority of their judges are women judges. There are quite a few Guyanese on the bench in the OECS, and we've made our mark throughout the region. So much so that in March of this year, the Caribbean Association of Women Judges was launched. Trinidad and Tobago took the lead, and the Trinidad and Tobago Women Judges Association was launched in October, November, I think, last year. I know it's 2013, latter part of 2013. And they really pioneered the effort to have a Caribbean Association. Justice Yonit Cummings Edwards, our Justice of Appeal, is on the executive of the association. I'm kind of like an associate, well, I shouldn't say associate member, but I can be co-opted to assist. So I'm like a Guyana representative. There's also the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, and I was on the first executive of that organization, or this organization, and I'm now the Guyana country rep on the executive. In terms of gender equality, we have had a greater push over the last 5 to 10 years, funded now by what is called UN Women. In the main, it was UNIFEM before. To sensitize and educate judges about gender equality. And I've benefited from gender equality training as a judicial officer. And fortunately for me, I'm also a facilitator. So I have gone to other countries in the region to facilitate training sessions with magistrates and judges, or combined magistrates and judges, or other what we call stakeholders, to use the current terminology, though that might have changed, to speak to stakeholders on the issue of gender equality. Because it is one thing to have the laws on the books, and as I said earlier, Guyana has a lot of very good legislation, and throughout the region, the Caribbean Community region, we have fairly good legislation from country to country. It varies, but it's fairly good. But the question is implementation. The question is attitude. Because when you come onto the bench, you come with your personality. You come with your background. You come with your values, good or bad. And so therefore, sometimes you do need to have a rejigging of what is going on upstairs in that brain of yours to make you understand and appreciate what is gender. There are many persons who mix up or don't appreciate the difference between gender and sex. Of course, sex is our natural physical um, manifestation of difference, but gender is how society sees us, expects us to act, our roles in society, and persons don't always understand that dynamic. So we have to do a lot of training. And the training has not only centered on gender equality, it also looks at the wider concepts of that are related to human rights issues. And so, but there's a great movement on that in the region. And the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, we had our third conference recently, has been pushing the human rights issue and has also been pushing gender equality issues.
Women have played a major role in the cultural, economic, and political movements in Guyana. Do you believe they are adequately recognized and respected? And if not, what more can be done?
Oh yes, they're adequately recognized and respected. I think I said earlier that we have had a number of women leaders, that the issues of the question of governance is an area that I know that a lot of work has been done. The Organization of American States, OAS, many years ago had funded governance training in terms of encouraging more women to participate in political governance at the highest levels, that is at our parliaments, and not only in Guyana, it was a regional project. But work has to be done to have leaders, not just women, but leaders, men and women, appreciate gender issues, appreciate human rights issues, appreciate, in the context of Guyana, well, not in the context of Guyana, but worldwide, to lower the decibel level. When you consider it, the world is seeming to be at war with itself on a constant basis. And the question is, how do we inculcate in leaders an appreciation that they have to listen, they have to try their best to address concerns. We do have limited resources all over the world, but they have to try their best to address the concerns of persons, to appear not to appear, but to have integrity, to be honest, to not be grabbing, to appreciate that you may be put in a position of leadership, but that doesn't mean all is mine. So it's a lot of work we have to do on all fronts. And it's not only just at the national level. It's a question of leadership at the club level. Because there are governance issues. You know, when people speak about politics, we always think of the parliaments of the world in our various countries. It's not just the parliaments. It's not just the United Nations. It starts at the basic club level. When we have children who are members of a club, there has to be a leader.
Of course.
The leader may be an adult. A leader may be another child. So that when, for instance, at the primary school level, you have monitors, whether it's the hallway monitor, the class monitor, or prefect, it's leadership that is being taught. And it is how you lead. So it's not just an adult thing. It's something that has to be inculcated from the very young.
What do you think is needed to enhance or develop current and future leaders?
Well, just what I've been saying. I mean, I don't know. Do we need leadership school? I don't know that we can necessarily have leadership school, though. Of course, you know,
it's possible.
It's possible. Persons go to, but you see, the schools that you go to, the educational institutions, the environments that you're exposed to, you can absorb the qualities. One can absorb the qualities. One can understand and appreciate what it is to be a leader.
What role have women's movements played in advancing some of the women's issues you're familiar with?
A tremendous amount of I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would not be sitting as a judge if it were not for the women's movement. You asked earlier about gender equality in judges in the region. The vast number of women in the judicial system, the administration of justice system throughout the region, would not have been possible without the women's movement. Starting from the suffragettes, I was, listening to all bit of the history of World War One and what the consequences were and so on, and how women got the vote after the war, and how women moved into the world of work because of the war. Mm-hmm. You had to look for other human resources and the opportunities that opened up to women. But women had to speak out, and they were speaking out for years, decades. I mean, when you read the history of the world, going way back, so that women have always come forward to have a voice. Whether they were allowed to do so in all spheres, we know it didn't always happen. But at the end of the day, a lot of groundwork was laid, a lot of the foundation was laid to allow women and girls to just be about anything you want to be now. Just about anything.
Talking about being a judge, how long have you been a judge?
This is my 10th year. At the end, thank you very much. I did it. It hasn't seemed like 10 years. It seemed like only yesterday I was sworn in. Yes, I was sworn in on the 31st of December, 2004. So officially, as of the 1st of January 2005, I was a judge.
Well, congrats. Is it a fair question to ask a sitting judge if they're having fun?
If they're having fun doing what? Judging?
Yes.
I wouldn't use the word fun, but it is gratifying. I have a a deep sense of satisfaction with what I do. I would not change. I would not change the profession that I decided to, the course of study that I took. Uh-huh. I wouldn't change. If I had to live my life all over again, I'd be quite happy to be a lawyer. Quite happy to be a lawyer. I've enjoyed my studies. I enjoyed my studies. And law is something like any other profession, but everybody says the lawyers read too much, and we read too much into everything. But it's taken a toll on my eyes, but I would do it all over again.
When did you first realize this is what you wanted to do? Do you remember the trigger?
No, as I said earlier, my father wanted me to get into science and number, and I said science is not for me. And since the word fail was not part of his vocabulary, I did the art subjects. I think it's after I left, or just at the end of sixth form. Yes. Oh. I didn't know before then. I say to people when they ask me, well, what do your children want to do? And I say, well, my girls don't know. And they say, but one is going to be in upper six, the other one's going into lower six. Hopefully, her exam results hopefully will be very good. And I said, but if they don't know, I have no problem with that because I didn't know either.
You were director of public prosecutions for a while. How would you say did that role prepare you for your role as a judge?
I don't know. Being DPP is a lonely job. You're the one. It's also a job in the front line. There's only one DPP. And everything that is passing in terms of crime, everybody wants the DPP to have a say about it. I enjoyed my 14 years as a public prosecutor. I think it prepared me, not just being DPP, but the entire journey through the chambers, starting as a state counsel in 1990 when I graduated from law school, from the Hewitting Law School. That period taught me independence. It taught me initiative. It grounded or concretized the legal principles that I had learned in law school. Because as with any other profession or any job, what you learn in university and what you actually do in practicality sometimes are two totally different things. Of course, you're bringing that knowledge to bear on what you do, But as I always say to law students, when I used to teach at the university, the law students, right now you're advising John Doe and Jane Doe on a piece of paper. But when you leave law school, you're not dealing with John Doe and Jane Doe on a piece of paper. You are dealing with a live person, an emotional person, an angry person, happy person, sad person, a person who does not know anything about the law, others who will want to tell you what the law is, and you have to grapple with all of that and advise them accordingly. Take their case, prosecute, in my case, prosecute the matter as a prosecutor, defense counsel defending. So you bring all of that experience together. And I think that, and I think I can say I know, that those 14 years allowed me to absorb the law, to practice the law, and so that when I went onto the bench, I had a good foundation. I think I had a reasonably good foundation. The bench is totally different.
It is.
Totally different.
I am just curious, and it is because I am not in that realm at all practice. As a DPP, and then as a judge, did you find that there were aspects of your personality that you didn't realize you had, that the DPP position demanded?
No. I don't think there was any difference. At least not for me. Let me speak for myself. The DPP weighs the evidence or the evidence that is presented in terms of whatever the police or the law enforcement agency, because it doesn't have to be the police alone, would have investigated, and they present. You, as DPP, and you, not only in Guyana, whoever's sitting in that position, we has to weigh that evidence. Because again, as I've told my students, and I've just said, you're dealing with a live person. If that person is charged, it could mean their life, their liberty is gone. Okay? As a judge, you're balancing and weighing what is happening in your court. And I remember a person saying to me, and one of my brother judges in particular, he said, when you sit on the bench, some or the others, not like if it's like you have a halo, but some or the other, you hear and see things that when you are on whichever side as a prosecutor or defense counsel, he was a prosecutor too, and he also had was in private practice, you're sticking to your side of the story. But as a judge, you have to keep those competing interests more or less balanced. So that's why you have the scales of justice. Okay, I'm not saying we get it right all the time. We are human beings. As one woman judge said at a conference, if you cut me, I will bleed. But at the end of the day, the prosecutor doesn't make a decision. In the sense that, okay, the prosecutor makes a decision to charge as DPP and the staff in the chambers. But when the matter comes to court, it is the judge who will decide, yes, this case is going to the jury or not. That's the criminal cases. In the civil cases where you have a plaintiff, you have a defendant, it is the judge who will decide who will get the house. And something as basic as that. So, when you decide who gets the house, somebody may have to move, or somebody would have to move. That's a life-changing issue. So that every step of the way as a judge, one has to listen to the evidence carefully, weigh the evidence as is presented. And many persons think that Well, I shouldn't say many persons, but I know persons think that, oh, well, the judge did this and the judge did that. It's always dependent, or should be dependent, on whatever evidence is presented before you. So if the lawyers make a mess of it, that there's no help that the judge can give.
What does it feel like sitting in that courtroom, knowing that you have people's lives in your hands?
For me, it is very humbling. And I'm very conscious of that. I'm conscious, I said earlier that my father always said, think. And I always try to think before I speak and act. I can't tell you what my facial expressions are. I think sometimes they may be a bit expressive, but I try my best to think before I speak and act. And I no doubt my brother and sister judges do the same. Because what you say carries great weight. Not only at my level at the High Court, at the appellate level. I mean, I would make a decision. I would write my reasons for a decision. A person may appeal. That is their right. Appeal to the Court of Appeal, which until 7 years ago was our final Court of Appeal. Now we have the Caribbean Court of Justice. But whatever the judges decide, that's it. One has to abide. Otherwise, one will be found in contempt of court. And so, judges write lengthy decisions. Some of the decisions are short. It depends on the complexity of the matter. But we give our reasons for the decisions that we give. So it may appear sometimes as though we pull things out of the hat. But we know we have to follow legal precedent, legal principles. We have to listen to the arguments of counsel. Sometimes you wish the litigant had a better lawyer, but you are not to enter into the arena and to take a side and to help anybody. You may make a suggestion. Sometimes you say to the lawyer, is that all you really have to ask? They're supposed to take the hint and say, something is missing. If they're smart, they might ask for an adjournment and try to figure it out and come back. If not, they carry on bravely and rue the day. But, but it's an awesome and onerous job.
What does it feel like, or what does it feel like the first time you sentenced someone to death?
It was nerve-wracking. I got we have a particular wording, I can't remember it now, but we have a particular wording, phrase that we have to use, paragraph that we have to read out if the jury comes in with a guilty verdict for murder. Of course, we have other human rights issues that have now arisen in relation to death penalty. So, and our legislation has changed now in Guyana, so it's not mandatory death penalty anymore. But when I had to sentence the person to death, I read it out, and I quickly got off the bench and then realized I hadn't discharged the jury. I hadn't told them they had to come back. So, of course, I made an about turn and went back onto the bench. But I look back at it and say it was all nerves. You know, and people think, oh, you're rather blasé and the judge doesn't get nervous. As I said earlier, if you cut me, I'll bleed. So I look back and see it was a case of nerves. Because on the bench, I seemed very confident, but inside I was like, And because I came off the bench so quickly, I realized I forgot something. Didn't discharge the jury, didn't tell them when they had to come back. So I quickly made the about turn. And then there's a tradition which I didn't know of at the time, but apparently the pen that you write with, that you write the minute in your minute book about passing the death penalty, you're supposed to break the pen. I didn't. But as I said, we've changed our law in Guyana now, so it's not mandatory any longer.
What is most satisfying to you as a judge?
What is most satisfying to me? It might seem cliche. Just trying to do justice as between the parties who come before me. As I said, a judge is not perfect. Decisions of a judge may be overturned. I've had some of my decisions overturned. I've had my decisions upheld. Sometimes your decisions are overturned, and years after, you're vindicated in the sense either that legislation is passed to accord with the decision that you gave that was overturned, or a new bench has a new thinking on the particular issue. But it is a very humbling experience for me. Maybe because my father was a judge, I subconsciously appreciate some of the nuances of the job. I don't know. I'm just guessing on that. But I do know from from having lived in the home with him and my own experience now that it is a lonely job. You can consult with your colleagues. You can seek, sources of information from senior lawyers in particular, and you have to do a lot of reading. If you're fortunate, we aren't so fortunate in Guyana right now, but if you're fortunate, you may have research assistants to help you. But at the end of the day, that decision carries that judge's signature. If it's a bench an appellate bench with more judges, it's a collective decision of those 3 or 4 judges, 5 judges. Sometimes you have a bank of 7. You may have a dissenting judgment, a lone voice in the wilderness. You may have more than one dissenting judgment, but at the end of the day, it is your work, your decision.
Let's take a quick break, but I want to ask you this question before the break. As a woman and mother, how do you maintain your composure when dealing with severe domestic violence against women and children? We are back with Justice Roxane George. Madam George, a question I asked before was the break is, as a woman and mother, how do you maintain your composure when dealing with severe domestic violence against women and children?
Don't have a choice. A judge can be emotional. I've done a case where it was a rape trial, and clearly the woman would have gone through an extremely traumatic experience, but there were issues in relation to the identification of the accused. So when I would have had to give the charge to the jury, which we call the summing up to the jury, I couldn't be emotional about it and consider as a woman that here was another woman who was violated, as a woman, as a mother. She was a mother with young children, how traumatic, and her children also there was some evidence in relation to her children in the matter. I cannot. One has to divorce oneself from one's emotional frame of mind when one goes on to the bench and approach the matter purely from the evidence that is led in the court. And in that case, there were a number of issues in relation to identification of the accused. And therefore, I was required by law to give directions to the jury on the issue of identification. So I couldn't say, well, because of the horrible circumstances of the case, I must abandon all of that. I'm trained to be a lawyer. As I said earlier, you have to balance. Whilst in the human rights context, we must respect the rights of the accused, we equally must respect the rights of the victim. Or I should have said it the other way. Whilst we must respect the rights of the victim, we have to equally respect the rights of the accused. And therefore, I have to put both sides of the story to the jury. I even have to tell the jury they mustn't be emotional about it. So, and that may sound difficult to the lay person. How could you divorce yourself from what is maybe your private reality or your private conversations, your personal views. So I'm very passionate, as I said earlier, about the issue of domestic violence. But I in the courtroom arena, deal with what is presented before me and the legal principles that are applicable.
In the chat room, Mignon said, Justice George is terrific. I've learned so much. It is like being in a class with your favorite teacher. I'm thoroughly enjoying this interview.
Oh, thank you very much.
What were some of the challenges you faced during your first years as a judge that you have overcome and can share with us?
What challenges I faced? Well, the volume of work at DPP's chambers was a lot, but Guyanese are litigious persons. Maybe Caribbean people generally, but Guyanese we know. They love to go to court for everything. And we're trying to push Chancellor Singh in particular, who is my most senior boss, and we have Chief Justice Chang below him. In Guyana and right through the region, we're trying to push alternative dispute resolution. And Guyanese seem not to want to understand that. I want my day in court. And so I'm not saying they shouldn't have it, but some matters should be settled.
Yes.
So it is the volume of work. I have gotten accustomed to it, and I have learned how to manage the volume of work. But it's always on your back. It's like, long ago we had a never done sweetie.
Yes. Oh, God.
It's a never done sweetie. And when one comes into the job, I mentioned earlier that it's a lonely life. When one comes into to be on the bench, I have always led a fairly sheltered life, a very conservative lifestyle I have. So, but when you become a judge, you can't be here, there, and everywhere. Whatever you used to do, many times you have to give it up. Apart from the workload, you simply can't be any and everywhere, because the person who you might meet and interact with might be the person who has to come and testify before you, might be the person who is the accused. I remember one magistrate saying to me, guess what happened to me? I went to market and this man hailed out to me and I chatted next day before me. But we live in a small society.
Right.
And so it's not very easy to isolate oneself. You can't isolate yourself. That's a fact. We are social persons. We're social beings. But we have to be very careful with what we do and what we say and where we go.
Any advice for young upcoming lawyers?
What I used to tell my students, and I tell lawyers, the word sleep is not part of your vocabulary.
It's not.
When lawyers come to be admitted to the bar, come before me for admission to practice at the bar in Guyana, I urge them what was told to me by Justice Perry, my father's good friend who admitted me to practice. Be committed to hard work. It's a tremendous amount of hard work. And I say to them also, be the lawyer's lawyer. One can always gallery in court. One can always throw one's robes. In Guyana we wear robes, the lawyers wear robes. One can fling one's robe to the left and fling it to the right. The public might be impressed with your gallery. I don't doubt that you sometimes need to gallery, but at the end of the day, be a lawyer's lawyer. When I say that, I mean show commitment to research, good research. When you present your arguments, present them in a logical, coherent manner that the court can follow. When you ask questions, don't be fumbling around. It annoys me. I mean, I don't like to use the word annoy, but it really annoys me when counsel come in and they're shuffling their papers, their witnesses not ready, in the sense that they have documents to tender. Well, we don't have the system as I know happens here, and we're moving to that system where you would pre-disclose a lot of exhibits and so on. We haven't gotten to that stage. We'll get there hopefully within the next year. But they're shuffling around and, may it please Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I don't have the document today. Could we have an adjournment? And it slows us down. It's, So I say to the lawyers, come prepared. Be prepared. Yes, you will get asked questions that are difficult, and you may have to ask for an adjournment. But once a judge sees that invariably you are a lawyer who comes prepared, you get cut some slack because you're on time for court. I always say, be on time for court. You're on time for court, and you're prepared.
Respect.
Yes.
Wasn't respect.
Yes.
When were you first introduced to human rights, and what did your involvement look like at the time?
As I said earlier, the absorption of human rights issues really came from high school. And then, as I said, when I left law school, when I returned to Guyana after completing my studies and got involved with the women's movement in Guyana, women's rights movement. And then Dr. Janice Jackson sent me some information on an international human rights studies program at Oxford and said, Roxane, you must apply. I'll never forget, I was in the line at the bank and I heard a voice behind me, Roxane, have you applied? No, Janice. Well, you will apply. Very well. And I got on with it. And my parents were extremely supportive. Very, very supportive. And I remember Justice Aubrey Bishop, mentor to many students, myself and many, many students over the many, many years. When I went to him, I said, I need a reference for, he said, readily, anytime. So I got a reference from him, Justice Bernard, and of course you're competing internationally, and I was fortunate to be accepted into the program at Oxford, and I had an enjoyable, it was an online course, so you did your studies online, you submitted papers online, then we had to go up in the 2 summer periods, July, August, in the 2 years, it was a 2-year program, and then you had to write a thesis. So I enjoyed my 2 years of study. It was exhilarating to me. I learned so much. And in the application, you had to show how you practice human rights. So I like to say to persons that human rights is not an issue for the police only, the state apparatus, the state versus the citizen. I see human rights issues as people issues. It's you and me issues. I respect your rights and you to respect mine. When we speak about noise level, we have issues about noise in Guyana and who likes to play their DJ sets or whatever it is at high decibels. You're not respecting my human right.
True.
But we don't think of it that way. And when we have the discussions, when I used to have the discussions in the outreach program sessions, and where I do have interactions with students, I say to them, think of human rights within the context of how you want to live, your values. What do you expect when you live in a residential area? What do you expect in the city of Georgetown, which we are complaining about so much? Yes, the authorities, and I say authorities in the widest sense, have a responsibility to clean up, etc. But we have responsibilities as citizens. So we have to see human rights in the context of what at the international level we speak of socio-economic and cultural rights. So it's not just a political thing. It's not only a political rights issue. It's just something that is pervasive and it affects our everyday living.
What was most challenging for you when working on human rights issues?
What was most challenging? What has been most challenging? That whilst people are hungry for knowledge about human rights and they appreciate the concepts in a way, they don't always seem to want to live it. So it becomes a human right if my person is affected, but I don't appreciate the human right of the other. And we have to, and this is not only just me speaking, I've absorbed all this from, working in human rights and from attending conferences and so on. And you'll always hear language of persons speaking about the other. And the other is not me. And therefore I can treat the other however. But if it comes to me, I want that other to treat me with respect. But we have to understand that it's a two-way. It's or even more than two-way. It's multi-way in how we want to engage with each other.
And women's rights, what did you find most surprising about people's reactions when you try to teach them or educate them on women's rights?
I'll say this in particular for the men.
Mm-hmm.
We found, and my friend Sandra Bart went to Lethem, and when she got there, I don't know what happened, but only men attended the session. She said they were most interested. Whenever we go out, I know that we've had feedback that some men would say, we thought it was a women's thing because it's women coming to talk. But when we started the discussion, they realized that it's not a women's thing. It's a human thing. But as I said earlier, we still have the disconnect about whilst we have the discourse in the quote-unquote classroom setting,
Yes.
the question is how do you translate that into the practicalities of life? And we have a disconnect in that. So we have a very good discourse, but we're not practicing necessarily what has to be done. I'm not saying it doesn't. I don't want to give the impression that everybody is, doing their own thing. That is not so.
Right.
But I'm just saying that we have challenges in that regard. And for me, for instance, the issues of violence. Violence is a human rights issue. Whether we want to speak about violence in the public sphere in terms of the police and other law enforcement agencies, or whether we want to speak about violence in the private sphere. Okay? So we have to address this kind of like split personality of yes, within the public sphere I will say, yes, I'm against violence against women, but at home, what's happening?
I'm talking about violence. I am just curious, as a friend too, you're in a position where you witness or you see or you hear evidence of violence, serious violence. And I know you mentioned earlier about separating your emotions and so on and so forth. But you're human. You've mentioned several times that if it cuts you, you will bleed. So some of it must be absorbed. How do you, let me use the word detox. How do you get up, detox from all of this?
My family is very, as I said earlier, my family is very supportive. I have a few very close friends. We get together, we have a good laugh about all kinds of things. Our school reunions every 3 years. I haven't attended all, but I know from listening to others that the reunions over the years have been fantastic. I've now attended my fourth, because my first one was at home in Guyana. And you interact with others and reminisce and old talk, as we say, and just have fun. But it's not, as I said, it's a lonely job. So I'm very careful with how I move and who I am with and what I say and so on. But once I'm with my very close friends, I have a blast.
When you're not running around or running behind your children or presiding over a case, what can you be found doing for fun or relaxation?
What can I be found for fun? Relaxation. Going to tea parties with my mother and mother-in-law. People say a very middle-class way of living, but I do enjoy my tea parties when they do come along.
I hear that.
Sometimes we go to lunch, friends visit from overseas, or at home we arrange a girls' night out, and sometimes my husband and I do go out, not very often, but we go out. We tend to celebrate as a family. We have family gatherings, as my children say. Mom, we don't have birthday parties. We have family gatherings. But yes, I try to emphasize the sense of family because they are my support.
Yes.
My family is my rock, and therefore I have my most fun with my family.
What drives you, and where do you draw your inspiration?
I guess, all that I've said earlier, I mean, my nurturing, people speak about nurture and nature. I guess it's a combination of both. I think I've been fortunate to be blessed with a brain that works. When I say that works, that thinkingly works, that I do have, I don't want to sound conceited, inner strength that allow me to be independent of thought and deed. As I said, I try my best to be respectful of others so that I can command respect. And that's about it. I mean,
if you could change one thing about women's issues in Guyana, what would it be?
Change. Address the issue of implementation. We definitely have to deal with have to have more work on implementation.
If you, in retrospect, what do you know now that you wish you knew before you pursue your career?
I don't know. That is so much hard work. Why I say that is because, as I said, I speak to my students when I used to teach, and I would tell them about it, and they'd come back afterwards and say, but we just didn't know it would be this bad. And I don't think I want to do law anymore. Yes, it's stressful. It's very stressful.
And I know you have fun when you get together with family and friends. But when is the last time you laughed unusually hard?
Unusually hard. Maybe at reunion 2 weeks ago. I don't know. I had fun at the sports day. Yes. I can't run. I can't jump. I can't skip. I can't hop.
Oh God.
My greatest achievement in the sporting arena. Never mind my husband and children. They've gotten all their genes in sport from him. My greatest achievement: 3rd place lemon spoon race in primary school at St. Gabriel's. So yeah, sports day at reunion. I had culture night. No, culture night at reunion. That was fantastic.
You grew up in the era of Guyana National Service, and I believe you were a member of that service. What was the experience like, and how did it in any way shape who you are today?
Well, I wasn't strictly a member of the National Service, strictly speaking, because I was what was called a UG pioneer, though I had not entered university as yet. I opted to do my National Service before I went to study. I had to do National Service because at the time, if you were getting a government scholarship, you had to do 1 year National Service. I will confess, I went kicking and screaming. But however, my group, Special Pioneer SPOC 84, Special Pioneers something Corps, can't remember what the O is for now, 1984, we went in September, and to Kimbia. That was an experience going in on the boat. We arrived at something like 3 o'clock in the morning, and the males had to offload the boat at Kimbia Wharf. And then we had to walk in. No, they took us in by vehicle, tractor trailer or something like that, but we went in. The 2 months I spent there, and maybe that helped me with the issues of inner strength, allowed me to appreciate that whilst I did enjoy my comfortable bed and my mother's sumptuous home cooking, that I could survive, that I could live in difficult circumstances. I'm not saying that we were at war and that I was in trenches anywhere. As I said earlier, I was looking at documentaries on World War I and discussions on World War II. It was nothing like that. And I won't pretend to equate myself with any of the hardships that soldiers actually go through. But for somebody coming out of high school, it was like a shock. But the friendships that I made, some of them are lasting till now. I guess I could say my husband and I got to know each other better because we were both on the same course. Um, the you learned that you had the will to do something. When I usually tell some of the young people I have chats with. I said, I learned that you could sleep on concrete, have a very good sleep on concrete. They said, absolutely not, Judge. I said, yes, you can. Because you get into an environment and you appreciate this is where I have to be and this is where I have to cope. I'm not saying that it can always happen that you will cope, but you understand that mindset. And we all coped. We all survived. Um, and looking back, I know my mother was in a state whenever I wrote the letters home describing what we were doing and how we were going through, what we were going through, the bad food that we were eating, the proteinated rice cake, which we called it at the time because it had worms in it. And you just break it out, take out the worms, and keep going. But it taught you mental toughness. It taught you physical toughness. I mean, when I came out from National Service in December of 84, I was brown as a berry. I was eating more. All the things that I used to tell my mother I will never eat, I ate. It changed you.
Yes, it does.
And I learned again, we go back to issues of grassroots. You did mention my home environment was different. Not special, but
Yes.
blessed. And I came to appreciate, again, persons of all walks of life. We were all together in it. We didn't have a choice.
Yes.
You learn to support one another. We had to carry the rifle 14-mile walk. 2 14-mile walks we had to do. And we had to do a 3-mile run. Well, of course, my 3-mile run, most of it was a walk. Garfield ran away and left everybody. That's my husband, Garfield Birchie. He ran away and left everybody, got in first. Because running to him was nothing. I remember my friend staying back with me and walking with me home. She's my friend until now. Okay, I met her in National Service. The 14-mile walk, we were the first one, okay. We didn't have, the second one we had to carry weapons. After time, that weapon became like a dead weight in my hand. And I remember another friend, young man, he took my weapon, so he carried 2. But you had a bond. Yes, and you learned to look out for one another. I scrubbed pots that were bigger than me. The soot in the kitchen, you wipe your eyes and there's soot all over your face.
Any photos?
No, we didn't have any cameras or anything. We had no cameras nowadays. It was a lot of selfies.
I wish Jackie
But we didn't have any cameras, so all of this is just all in my memory. I read an article the other day, somebody said, but why can't we keep everything in our memories now? Everybody would have been clicking, and taking selfies. But looking back, I would not trade it, no. It was an excellent experience. I think it prepared me to, I'm not saying people who go off to university, without national service aren't prepared to go and live a life without mom and pop and having somebody to help you and look after you and guide you along. But I think it helped me and my friends who also went through national service to settle in so much easier, much more easily into life on our own and coping in a new environment.
Have your children ever heard a story?
Yes, I've told them. I keep telling them they need a dose of national service themselves.
But as a mother of athletes and the wife of a former table tennis and squash champion, what are your thoughts on children being introduced to sports at an early age and how sports can affect their academic and social skill development?
I have absolutely no difficulty, and I think children, if they have the wherewithal, should get into any form of sport, any form of activity. But that being said, anybody listening to me will say, but she never ran a race in her life. And I was horrible at long jump and high jump. Yes, I know all of that. But physical activity is important, it's healthy. But when it comes to sport and extracurricular activities generally, because it doesn't have to be only sport, it could be dance, it could be music, it could be art, drama. There's so many ways of expressing volunteerism in other ways. Some children are members of Leos and Rotaract clubs and guides and scouts, brownies and that kind of thing. But the challenge is the balance. And as parents, myself and Garfield, my husband, we have tried to emphasize to the children that you have to balance it. It's not easy. It requires a tremendous amount of time management. I said earlier that I thrive on lists. Time management is very important. But in the world that we live, time is money, time is everything. You know, a click of a mouse could be the difference between, do we still call it mouse now with the computers? Okay, because you know the technology, the language is changing every other minute. But with the click of the mouse or the tap on your tablet, and I have to keep remembering tablet is not only medicinal, that's time. And therefore, issues of balance and managing yourself, how you allocate your energies, that is very important. And I've been fortunate that my girls in particular, much older than my son, have been able to manage their time. Of course, we both have to help them do that. My son is you put him on a squash court, he will play all day, all night. And they're all good at squash.
Wow.
And they've all done and are doing well academically. I have to say that I'm truly blessed in that regard. But as I said, I have the support mechanisms around me. In now our mothers, and so it's not easy. I will tell anybody it's not easy. I know a friend of mine says I'm a tiger mom. I don't know if I'm a tiger mom. I know that it requires discipline.
Yeah.
And I say to my children, you have to be disciplined. In life, you have to be disciplined. Yes, things will fall apart. Yes, sometimes the room gets messy. Yes, the books will get dog ears. But you have to clean it up and you have to unfold those dog ears at some point in time. And that's how life is.
Yes. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? The success of my family, the blessings that I have, yes.
If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 15-year-old self?
What would I tell my 15-year-old self? Work hard and have fun at it.
I like that. What would you like your legacy to be?
My legacy. I don't know, that's for people to say, not for me. That I try to serve, I try to help, that I did help somebody, somewhere, somehow, in whatever small way, whether it was a kind word, a gesture, a bit of advice, a smile, a look, whether it's a serious look or, yeah. I don't really look at it in terms of what I'm leaving as a legacy or anything like that. I just try to live the best I can.
You wear so many hats. You're so many things. But what is one thing about you most people do not know that might surprise them?
That I'm not all seriousness. that I can have fun.
I guess someone who passed through your court might be happy to hear.
Well, I know they want me to be serious in court, so I do twitch a smile in court. Yeah, sometimes we do have moments that are a bit amusing. Yes, that I have fun. I do have, and participating in reunion activities. I have modeled. I didn't think that I'm basically I'm a shy person. I know people think, and they say coming on to the end of the video, she's saying she's shy and she's been speaking so much. Basically, I'm a shy, quiet person. I prefer to be in the background of things, doing what I have to do, but not, out in the limelight. But I modeled. I've modeled now twice. In Jamaica reunion, we have our presentation, and at home, I have fun doing something different. I had fun doing something different.
My last question that I ask all my guests: what makes you laugh out loud?
I'm not going to laugh out loud because there are a lot of people out there who know I have a very loud laugh. Let me put it that way. When my friends and I get a good joke,
right,
and you get a good Guyanese belly laugh.
Yeah, they know the belly laugh.
Yes, yeah.
You know, time crept up on us, and I went over time a little bit because I wanted to ask you some questions. So I apologize for that, but I must say thank you so much, Roxanne, and I'm really honored, and I'm sure our audience benefited from this conversation. But more importantly, because it is so difficult to pin you down or get a time slot from you. You're so very busy. So it really is an honor and a privilege to have you here tonight.
I thank you very much for having me, and I wish all your viewers and listeners and yourself all the best in the future.
Can I say one more thing? I must also thank Rose Cadogan,
my dear friend.
Our dear friend, for making this possible. So thank you and good evening.